Hi everyone, it's Liam here from Racing the Races. So we move on to day 2 of the Aintree, the Ayr Scottish National meeting, and I've got a few selections that I like for tomorrow. I think 3 at Ayr, 4 at Ayr, and 1 actually at Newbury on the flat. So let's start off looking at the Novices Champion Handicap Chase, which I'm a big fan of the Willie Mullins horse here, Loch Lynn. I feel that the 3 mile trip really suits this horse, and some of his form this season has been pretty good, and even some of his form last season, there was some really good efforts. Previously over hurdles, he's a Grade 2 winner, beating Stellar Story, Answer to Cave, Search for Glory. He then went to Leopardstown and went for a Grade 1, went off 7-1 for that in February of last year, and that didn't quite work out. Finished 3rd in a Grade 2 Novices hurdle, then finished 2nd in a listed hurdle, and this season he's been over fences. He's started off in a beginner's chase, where he finished behind Shannon Royale and High Class Hero. Both of those are just significantly better horses than Loch Lynn. Now, Loch Lynn then finished 5th in another beginner's chase behind the likes of Now Is the Hour, Captain Cody, 3-card Bragg, in front of Olympic Man, in front of My Trump Card. I thought that was a good effort. And then last time out, slight drop in trip, down to 2 mile 6, where he finished 2nd to High Class Hero. Now, I really liked High Class Hero for the Scottish National if he'd run in that. Loch Lynn takes the easier option. He was also in the Scottish National, I believe. Takes the easier option, in my opinion, because Willie can split them apart. You know, he can. He's got. How many has he got in the National? Let's just have a quick look. What has he got in the Scottish National tomorrow? He has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's got 6 in the Scottish National, so he didn't need to have another one with Loch Lynn. Now, considering he had the 6, I'm sure he could have potentially found something else maybe to run in this race, but I think he's coming here thinking, my horse is gonna take all the beating here, Loch Lynn, off just 1-4-3's handicap mark. He's probably faced higher class opposition back in Ireland, and this could be a similar sort of result as they had with Sharjah, who was clearly very talented, was just taking on better horses in Ireland and wasn't good enough, but then when he came over to England and was able to run in this handicap chase over 3, he was able to win that. So I'm sticking with Loch Lynn tomorrow, who is currently available at, let's have a look, currently available at 4-1. You can see there's plenty of 4s. There is a 9-2, but that's an outlier, so we'll only talk about the 4-1. But yeah, I think Loch Lynn could run a really big race there in the second race at Ayr. Sticking at Ayr, we move on to the next race that interests me, which is the Champion Hurdle, the Scottish Champion Hurdle, where I'm going to take on both Willie Mullins and Dan Skelton with the Paul Nicholls trained Cabral du Matin. I think Cabral du Matin is a very smart 5-year-old. I think he's going to improve. I think he's going to be a good chaser next year. And his form this year, I think, has been pretty good. After winning in January last year the Juvenile Hurdle, they came to Kempton, won a conditional jockey's handicap very impressively, beating King William Rufus. That form has worked out okay. They then went to Ascot for a feature handicap hurdle, the Ladbrokes handicap hurdle, and they got beat a short head. Back in 3rd was Be Aware, 4th was Tritonic, who was running over the correct trip. Dysart Enos was back in 7th. I thought Cabral du Matin ran a really good race behind Fiercely Proud, who had threatened to run a big race before. It just hadn't quite worked out. You know, he'd finished 6th in a good Greatwood hurdle, so there was no shame in finishing 2nd, beaten a short head there. He then went to Windsor and again bumped into one that had always had threatened to run a big race in Secret Squirrel, Secret Squirrel went off the 11 to 4 favourite. He was rated 126 that day. He's now up to 133, and that horse ended up in the William Hill Hurdle before falling. I think will be still a nice horse for next season. Secret Squirrel. Cabral de Matan probably found that ground a little bit on the soft side for him, and yet still running really good race for second off this 139 mark. He didn't move in the handicap, and I think that's key here. He's only a 5-year-old. I think he's better than his handicap mark, and I think he will prove to be... I wanted Bunting. I felt once a bit softer going. I'm not totally a fan of Dysart Enos. Valgrand kind of feel needs to come down a bit further in the handicap. Ethical Diamond is probably the biggest danger for me. Is he priced accordingly? Let's have a look. Yes, so Ethical Diamond is the favourite and Cabral de Matan is second favourite. But I think Cabral de Matan at 7-2, I think he might go off favourite, even with the Willie Mullins runners, the Dan Skelton runner, because I just think he's very, very unexposed and progressive, and there's a lot more to come from Cabral de Matan. We move on to the next race I want to talk about, which is the 335, which is the Scottish National, and I like 2 in this race, and I'm actually going to have... This could play a big part in the trainer's title, with Dan Skelton and Willie Mullins vying for that, and I'm going to pick one of each. I am quite keen on Spanish Harlem and Sail Away. Now, neither of those are at the head of the market. Let me just have a look at what the prices are for these two. I think both of these are going to run really good races. Sail Away is available at 16s, and Spanish Harlem is available at 16s. I think both of those are going to go really well here. So Sail Away is returning to the scene of probably his best performance of his career, when he was winning that 3-mile handicap chase that's earlier on in the card. He won that race by 11 lengths, beating Forward Plan by 11 lengths, City Chief back in third. That's good form. Forward Plan, who was rated 125 that day, was last seen running and falling, unfortunately, at Doncaster and losing his life in the Great Yorkshire Chase, rated 138. So he definitely kicked on from there. He went on to win a Bet365 handicap chase at Doncaster. He won a Coral Trophy at Kempton, then continued to run really well, finishing third to Cruise Control last year at Aintree, third at Doncaster at the beginning of the season or in December, before unfortunately losing his life at Doncaster in January. So the fact that Sail Away was able to beat him so impressively probably suggests that was very good form. He beat a horse who ended up being rated at least £13 higher by 11 lengths. Now, Sail Away, his career hasn't gone the same way. His career has actually gone worse. You know, he's become suggestively a worse horse in that he's actually rated £4 lower now. But he's just running himself into a bit of form. He's just starting to run decent races, having dropped in the handicap. He obviously, after winning at Ayr, went up significantly in the weights, was rated as high as 138. He's dropped now, or did drop down to a mark of 129, and last time out finished a good second behind the Doyen Chief, beaten a neck. Did go up £3 for that, but that still means he's £4 lower than the scene of his best run, which was at this track when winning the 3-mile handicap chase. If he stays the 4-mile trip, which I think he will, I think he's overpriced here at 16th. I think he will run a really nice race at 16-1. The second horse that we like for the other trainer, Willie Mullins, is Spanish Harlem. Now, Spanish Harlem actually ran in this race last year, and he finished a decent 6th, beaten 8.5 lengths, or 8.25 lengths, when rated 140. Now, he runs here off a mark of 136, so he's actually lower in the handicap. He's got the cheek pieces on, so it gives them a reason why there was a sudden improvement. And his form this season hasn't been terrible. 7th in a Thaistes chase, not a bad run. 4th last time out in a Grand National trial over 3 mile 3, when looking like he needed further. this 4 mile trip is probably what he needs. Now, last year he was held up right out the back, and Paul Townend, who Paul got to pick from the Willie Mullins horses last year, Paul Townend chose to ride Spanish Harlem, and he was working his way through the field, and then probably just did his effort making his way through the field rather than having that extra bit at the finish. Now, this year, as a 7-year-old, and with that run under his belt, hopefully Brian Hayes can keep him a little bit closer. Now, Brian was obviously unlucky not to win the Grand National last week with Grange Clare West, who I feel, if he didn't make a mistake at that last, I think he would have won, to be honest. And I wonder whether Willie's rewarded Brian for that good ride, or said, you were very unlucky, you get first pick, and he's picked Spanish Harlem. Obviously Patrick's won the Irish, the Grand National, so probably didn't get first pick. And yeah, I just feel that being a 7-year-old over this 4 mile trip, now's the time to really prove that he is nicely handicapped. He only went off 12s last year. £4 lower, a year older, should stay better. Hopefully not given as quite a ride. He's 16s this year. I think he's going to run a really big race this year. And finally, the last race that I want to talk about is at Newbury, which is the Spring Cup, the feature handicap on the day at Newbury. And the horse I like here is one of our good friends, Classic. Now, there's a couple of reasons I like Classic. So first of all, he's been gelded. That could really change the fortunes of Classic. They held out as long as possible. 2, 3, 4. They kept him as an entire all the way through his 2-year-old, 3-year-old and 4-year-old campaign, probably hoping he would kick on to the heights that they were expecting. He always looked frustrating, and last year one of his best runs at Sandown, he finished a neck second on his second run of the season, and it probably never really went right after that. Because of that, he's obviously dropped in the handicap. He starts this season off a mark of 88. Now, that's actually his lowest handicap mark he's ever had, 88. And he comes back to Newbury, and his form at Newbury is actually pretty good, particularly over this mile trip. He's only had the one run over this mile trip, but he's also finished a good 4th when really unlucky in August 2023. 2.5 lengths, 2 3/4 lengths behind Spangled Mac. He went off the 7-2 joint favourite that day. That came off a mark of 91. 10 days later, he came back to Newbury, or went back to Newbury, off that mark of 91, finished second over this mile trip, beaten half a length by Crack Shot. As I said, that was off a mark of 91. He's now down to 88. James Doyle takes the ride. James has never actually ridden him before. It's always been Pat Dobbs. And that'll be really interesting to see if James can get a tune out of him late on. He always travels nicely, doesn't always pick up. That's what I'm hoping he does do tomorrow. And if he does, off this, his lowest handicap mark he's ever been off, at a track that he runs well at, I think he's going to run a really nice race here. He is being supported, you can see. You can still get 8s, 8.5, 9s, so probably we'll say 8s because everyone can get 8s. I really like him, and I think he's going to run a nice race here. Now that he's been gelded, he might decide to put it all in, and that could be the making of him. So they are my selections for tomorrow. A quick recap. In the 143, I like Lachlan. I think this is an easier race than what he's been running in Ireland. Runs in this handicap, just needs to be weighted with. The 215, I think the Paul Nicholls Cabral de Matan has the best form coming into it. He's massively unexposed still, and on this better ground, I think he can take all the beating. 2 in the National, the Scottish National, I like Spanish Harlem, who comes back for a second year after finishing 6th last year. He's a bigger price, he's a lower rating, and yet his form is very similar to what he achieved last year. Just needs to be a little bit further forward, being that year older. And Sail Away, who returns to the scene of his best win when winning that handicap beating forward plan by 11 lengths off a £4 higher mark. He is very well handicapped, and the Skeltons will definitely be trying to win this, and they've probably looked at who's their best chance of winning the Scottish National out of all of their runners, and they've ended up with Sail Away. And finally, Classic, the gelding operation could well see him turn the corner this season and really kick on to be that horse that I've believed he would be for the last couple of seasons.